All right, Strat. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, we were talking uh before we started recording here. We've been talking about a couple things and what I wanted to get into is I'm going to bug you about your practice as far as getting started because I know that that's been a I say fairly recent thing. And then we're going to get into just the way that you practice because I think that would be interesting as well. And then ultimately, we'll get into the stuff I think most people are curious about, and that's Instagram advertising and advertising online. Because you've done, I think, a lot of really cool things in a really short period of time. But just kind of starting, like, when did you start? Like, when did you get out of school?
Yeah, so I graduated from Parker University here in Dallas in August of 2021. And then I opened up my practice, like grand opening, took my first patient September 19th of 2021. So like just a little over 1 month after graduation, because I think I graduated on like the 6th of August, something like that. And then opened right up and took my first patient. Only saw one person that day, and then it was off to the races.
Yeah,
So I've
see,
been in
that's
practice for, oh, sorry, I've been in
no, no,
practice
go ahead.
for almost a year and a half, somewhere around there right now.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's crazy because I thought it was even longer than that. So that's kind of blows me away because I know a little bit about how you've been doing. And there you talk about that first patient. I remember my first day. Like my first day was like I didn't have anybody and the books were pretty empty. And I know that when you got started, let me ask you this first, because you have a background. How old were you when you graduated? Like how old are you now?
so I'm 31 now. So
Okay.
when I graduated, I believe I was 30 or potentially 29,
Yeah.
30, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the only reason I bring that up is because like I was 24 when I graduated and I was like one of the younger, I was in like the younger group. And then there
Mm.
were people in our class that were a little bit older because they had like other careers or they had kind of started down a different path and they had gone, they hadn't gone straight through school. And And I think that there's a potential advantage to that in the sense of maturity and stuff like that. So, and I know that what you were doing beforehand, but can I let people know like what you were doing before you went to chiropractic college?
Yeah. So I definitely agree that there's an advantage there. So before chiropractic, I was a massage therapist, and I was a massage therapist for, by the time I graduated chiropractic school, I'd been a therapist for about 13 years.
Yeah.
So like I started massage school when I was like 17, and then graduated and got my license like right there around my 18th birthday. And then I did massage from then all the way through until I finished chiropractic school. Now, obviously in grad school, I dialed my business like way
Yeah.
back. Um, but yeah, it was a huge advantage because I had a lot of experience with the business model that I'm in now, which is a solo doc, like all cash, no support staff type practice.
Yeah.
And that was my massage model. So the first like 2 or 3 years of my massage career, I worked in spas and worked in some gyms and some settings like that. But about 3 years in, I opened up my own massage practice, and that's how I did it. Everything all cash, because obviously massage isn't like I'm not going to bill for anything. I don't have an MPI number. Um, and I just did everything solo. So it's like, you're doing all your marketing, you're doing all your scheduling, you're doing all the actual treatments, you're doing all the phone calls, everything. So I've been doing that for 10 years. So when I decided to open up, I was like, well, all I really have to do functionally is swap out chiropractic for massage as the service I'm providing or the product that I'm selling. And then outside of having significantly more responsibility over like radiographs and diagnostics and all of that, it's relatively the same. And I
Yeah.
still operate it the same. So I was very comfortable on day one.
Yeah. That's actually something that, and the reason I want to bring that up is because I am such an advocate of giving people realistic expectations. And when you see someone, and I saw this when I was graduating myself and when I had friends that were a little bit older than me. And I would see some of the older people, they seem to do better quicker. And I didn't, I don't know, like I would have friends from seminars and stuff like that, that I don't know their background or people even I went to class with. And I didn't think much about their kind of life experience impacting like how things went from the point that they started. But what I don't want people to think is they'll listen to you and listen to your story or watch you from afar and think that, you just rolled out of bed with, your last job. Cause my last job before I became a chiropractor was I pushed carts at Lowe's.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
there's no transferable skill from pushing carts at Lowe's, other than they're both physical jobs, right?
Yeah. It's a very different experience. I think, and I kind of talk about this, like my life leading up to this point has kind of just been like a perfect setup, like to just
Yeah.
really, it's almost like softball, but or like baseball on a tee, right? It just had this teed up to kind of knock it out of the park because I've been in martial arts since I was 3 years old.
Yeah.
So I have a tremendous amount of like body kinesthetic awareness and the
Yep.
ability to produce force quickly. So that transferred over to the adjustment incredibly well. And then by the time I was starting chiropractic school, I had 9 or 10 years experience in massage. So that's a lot of palpation skills, communicating with patients. It's a lot of, knowledge about how you actually go hands-on with someone's body
Yep.
and help them. And so a lot of soft tissue obviously transferred over to that. But so those two skills came together really well for me. So it didn't take long to get really good at palpating the joints and the motion. And it didn't take long to learn how to produce force and deliver an effective adjustment.
Yeah.
And so I was able to just kind of snowball that group of skills through the end of school and then go straight into practice.
Yeah, and I think that's what I mean by, I think, having a proper perspective of where someone is at, because you have this like you have these this Venn diagram of what are your skills, what are your opportunity, what are you interested in, and where those all kind of meet, you have the potential for doing well quickly. And in your case, because of your background with the martial arts and because of your background of running a business, dealing with patients, I mean, dealing with people, whether you call them patients or not, but it's like dealing with people, dealing with appointments, all of that stuff. You had so much stuff overlap that that space where you had the potential to have good results quickly was actually, I think, much bigger than someone like myself or someone that's doesn't have those skills. Because I actually believe when you talk about the martial arts, like I was always into sports. Like I played a lot of sports. I've always had really good, just that fine motor movement, muscle control. And I always felt like that transferred over to adjustments where it's like someone like that is going to, and I think even more so with martial arts, but someone like that who's into sports, into martial arts, whatever, is going to be set up to be a much better adjuster. Now, does it mean you can't learn those skills? Sure, you can. But if you have that history, I think that you're already way down the path of becoming a good adjuster versus someone who's like never played sports, never been into martial arts, never done anything like that. I think those are the people that oftentimes struggle with the adjustment part of being a chiropractor.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And even just looking at like my own classmates as we were going through the program, the athletes and the people who were like sports oriented, they all tended to pick up the motor skills quicker. They
Yep.
tended to be better adjusters, at least in while we were all learning, than the people who did more of like an academic type focus, or maybe they were into, music or something else.
Yeah.
And so I definitely saw that in my class when I was going through.
Chiropractic is such an interesting, I think massage therapy is probably similar in the sense that I always refer to it as a performance-based job, where it's like you can have all the knowledge and it is important to have the knowledge. It's important to know what you're doing, but it's, like in sports, if you aren't good at doing sports at a high level, but you understand sports at a high level, you could become a coach. And it's, you still have a lot to give. And I suppose maybe there's something to that in chiropractic as far as becoming a teacher, but the reality is like, if you're in practice, that it doesn't not matter if you understand every little thought about chiropractic and every little possible thing about the human body. If you can't put your hands on someone and deliver, it is so incredibly important.
Yeah. That's actually something I've been thinking a lot about this lately. And I I think because there's a big push to be like an incredible diagnostician. And I always respect, people who are very well educated and who are an incredible diagnostician. But a lot of times those people, what I've seen is that they just cannot adjust that well. And if you can't deliver the goods, then you're not going to be able to get people better and you're not going to be able to deliver that experience to the patient.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed is that because they're the people who tend to be very, very good clinically, diagnosticians, maybe they want to work in the hospital setting. They tend to get like really off into like rehab, or they tend to kind
Yep.
of diminish the potential or the effects of spinal manipulation of the adjustment. And I think it's interesting because maybe you get there by not being good at the adjustment. Then you watch patients not get better from getting adjusted. And then you start to conclude that, well, the adjustment doesn't actually do that much. And that's something that I think guides a lot of people that go over into that territory. I think when you really develop the skill and you really can deliver an incredible adjustment, you just watch people get better in
Yeah.
your office, and all of a sudden you get it, right? Like you get how powerful chiropractic is for people. So that's always something that I consider when people are in that kind of mindset is, well, how good are you really at delivering the adjustment?
Yeah. I think that chiropractic is incredibly unique in the bang for the buck that the adjustment delivers, like what it provides. Because if you find someone, and I had this conversation, I was on an upper cervical, because I did mostly upper cervical when I was in practice, and that's kind of the epitome of uh, trying to do a lot with a little. You know what I mean? It's like because
Right.
you're focusing on the upper cervical spine, and that's pretty much it. And but I was on an upper cervical podcast recently. They had me come on, and they were just talk. We were just talking shop, and we got talking about technique. And I told him, I said, my philosophy when I first got started was because I loved upper cervical so much. It's like upper cervical is the best. Everybody should do upper cervical. That was kind of my feeling about it. Now I value excellence above all else. And I would rather go to someone who is excellent at what they do from an adjustment standpoint, from a chiropractic standpoint, and regardless of the technique. I would rather go. I mean, we make fun of Logan Basic, as people that go to Logan, the brown thumb technique, and it's like whatever.
Right.
But I've been to a doctor who was excellent at Logan Basic, and I would rather go to someone who does something bizarre or weird or whatever, and they're great at it, than go to someone who is doing mediocre adjustments and it's a technique that I like more. And
Yeah.
that's something I think that I do tend to think that in the more vitalistic or at least kind of hands only type of chiropractic practices, they do tend to prioritize the adjustment and the adjustment skill above a more of a rehab clinic. And that doesn't mean you can't be good at adjusting and be in a rehab setting. It just, I think that it's valued more, kind of like what you said.
Well, 100%, because I think when you're in that kind of vitalistic practice model, which I'm not, I would consider myself more of an evidence-based, evidence-informed
Yeah.
type
Yeah.
approach to it. But I think when all you have to offer as your product is the adjustment,
Yeah.
you've burnt the bridges, right? You sunk the ships out in the harbor. There's no going back. So if the adjustment doesn't work, you've got nothing else. You can't go take them into rehab. You can't go put them on stem or on the
Yeah.
traction table, or you don't have these other things. So it almost forces you to be dedicated in a way that kind of mixing doesn't, because if you are not getting people better, you don't have anything to turn to.
Yeah. And I think it's probably, you're probably right. Like the way you put it, it has more to do with um, your tools in the toolbox than it does your philosophy. Because you can have my chiropractor, my very first chiropractor was more of kind of a sports injury rehab type guy. And he would do some e-stem and hot pack and stuff. Honestly, I think he does this stuff just to bill it. Like, I mean, if we're
Yeah.
being honest, like, I don't think he really, that wasn't the stake. That wasn't what you were
Right.
paying for. That was
Yeah. If
just,
eSTEM wasn't available, it's not like your treatment plan falls apart.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Mm.
He was an incredible adjuster, still is an incredible adjuster. And the, but he had more of that kind of sports rehab kind of model, but he emphasized the adjustment. He was good. And I've been spoiled in my life. Like, I've only had a few chiropractors that have been my chiropractors, and they've all been incredible adjusters. Now, I've had bad adjustments because you can't go to chiropractic college and not get bad adjustments, and get those noob hands.
Yes. Yes.
Oh.
My spine does not miss being in school at all.
I got so many stories of bad adjustments, and man, it's just, I've told people because people that aren't chiropractors don't really understand. And I usually do explain it in the context of martial arts. because I think that that is the best way of understanding the adjustment, where I said it's not about it's not about power. It is about precision and quickness, and it's accuracy. It's about that. And, sure, you can get away with stuff when you're strong. You can get away with being a crappier technician when you're, I'm 6'4". I can get a lot of leverage. I'm a big guy. So it's like, I can be a crappy adjuster and still get stuff to move. But that's not skill. That's just physics,
Right.
and where you really win is getting better at the craft. And it has to do with quickness and precision.
Yeah, I think I've noticed sometimes that really small women,
Yeah,
once they get it down, they become incredible adjusters. Like if you get a really small woman who can adjust a really big guy's lumbar spine,
it's
that's going to be a
impressive.
great adjustment, right?
Yep.
And it's because she had to get her vectoring,
Yep.
her speed, everything exactly right, or that spine's not moving.
Yep. It's lockout, everything. Like if you see a small woman, or even a small guy, like a real small frail or small framed guy who's really adjusting big people, they are they're doing a good job. They have to do everything right.
Yeah, 100%, 100% agree.
So when you were doing massage therapy, what's the decision to become a chiropractor? I mean, I understand people that do massage, like a lot of people do massage. They get to the point where they're just like, I'm not doing this forever because my hands are gonna fall off and whatever. But what's the thought process of I'm gonna be a chiropractor?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of have that stereotypical chiropractic story where I got injured, chiropractor fixed me up, and I was like, hey, maybe I should do this.
Yeah, it's a good
But
story.
I I had been doing massage for a long time. I had taken a lot of CEs, a lot of classes, done everything. I was teaching massage part time in massage schools. I was teaching CEs to other massage therapists, and I just got kind of bored with it. And obviously your income capped. I mean, massage therapists, you can make a decent living, but I don't know really any massage therapists that make a great living. So I was like, okay, I'm bored as hell for one. I need to do something else so I
Yeah.
can be more interested in my work. Two, I feel like there are some things for my patients or my clients at the time that I couldn't do for them. Like that, I was seeing them make benefits or make strides in physical therapy, or maybe they were going to see a chiropractor.
Yeah.
And then something that I had been trying to work on with them got much better. So I knew that there were other things I could be doing for people. So I was looking into physical therapy. I was even looking into going the MD route. And then I got injured in jujitsu and basically hurt a rib pretty bad. And I was just suffering. I'd never been to a chiropractor before. And I was actually pretty skeptical of chiropractors because, I was like, no, they'll kill you. They're all witch doctors. They're not
Yeah.
real doctors. All the typical stuff I bought into. So my teammates in jujitsu got tired of listening to me complain and sit on the sidelines. And
They
actually,
said
my
stop
buddy,
whining.
yeah, my buddy goes, "Come on, get in the car." And I was like, "Where are we going?" And he drove me to the joint, and I got adjusted at the joint. And when he hit me on that rib, it felt like I'd been shot. But I got up off the table, and I mean, I was like a 7 or 8 out of 10 pain. I mean, like every time I'm taking a deep breath in, I got that
Yeah.
stabbing sensation. And I got up off the table. I was like 80% better after
Yeah.
one adjustment. I said, "Well, what do I need to do?" He goes, "Come back in for the next 2 days until this goes away." So I came back in. By the end of 3 adjustments, I had no more pain. I competed in the tournament with my team at the end of the month. And so after that, I was kind of like, all right, well, maybe there is something to this chiropractic thing. So I started looking into it. And I didn't do any research. I didn't tour any schools. I Googled chiropractic school near me. Parker popped up. Parker
Yeah.
was like 15 minutes from my house.
Yeah.
So I called the admissions department, said, hey, what do I need to do to get in here? Went back and finished my undergrad, which I had dropped out about halfway through um, on my first attempt at undergrad. And then, so finished my undergrad and then started at Parker.
Yeah, I actually did the same thing. Like I've lived in St. Louis area my whole life, and people are like, "Why'd you choose Logan?" I'm like, "Cause I could drive there."
Yeah, I already live here. It's very close. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I literally looked at no other school. I didn't even know about any other schools. I just was like, "Oh, that's close. I'll go there."
Yeah, 100%. And then that allowed me to maintain the massage practice that I had built while I was going through a lot of my schooling, so that I could still, because otherwise, not only would I move to a new location to start school at some other school, but then I'd also lose my practice or,
Yeah,
have to
you lose
find
your
some
income.
way to deal with that. So it worked out really well to just kind of stay put. And it was very convenient for Parker to be so close to me.
Yeah. because that's often not the case for people. So, I mean, you and I were both lucky that, because that was my decision as well, because I was living, because I was still going through undergrad. I was still living at home with my folks, and I could live at home and save money. And it was a money decision. It was just like, I can save a lot of money by going to Logan. And but a lot of people don't have that. If you live, somewhere where there's not a chiropractic college, you don't even have that option.
Yeah, we had a lot of people in my class that were from all over the place.
Yeah.
So I was very, very thankful and very lucky to have that opportunity like you did.
Yeah, because I mean, when you get out, people don't realize that, money is oxygen, you know,
Yeah,
and it doesn't seem like that big of a deal when you're in school and if you're taking out a loan or kind of whatever, and you're just like, it just seems like numbers on a piece of paper, and then you get out and it's just like, there's so many people I think that get sticker shock. So many chiropractic students, they don't think about what they're doing, and they're not cutting cost as much as possible and trying to make it as painless as possible. And then they get out and realize, wait a second, I've really handcuffed myself for a long time here because of my decisions.
yeah. And that first loan payment comes due and you're looking at it and you're going, Jesus Christ, every month.
Forever.
Forever. Yeah. Defer, 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 die. I think that's the plan, right?
Yeah, I said, I think I think it was Thanksgiving this year. My brother-in-law, I made some comment about having student loans, and he looked at me funny and he's like, "You still have student loans?" And I said, "Yeah." First of all, I said, I locked them in at a really low interest rate. So at this point, every year that goes by, I'm paying them back with funny money because inflation is higher than what my interest rate is.
Right.
And I said, but they're 30-year loans. I was like, I have no desire to pay them off early. Like, I just don't. I just, that's just what they are. I'm going to be paying them off for the next however many years, and I'm fine with not paying them off early. I don't care. Now, other people have the philosophy of get them done as soon as possible. I don't. I'm just like,
Yeah.
whatever. I just make
I
the
just
payment.
I don't like that philosophy. I like more of your philosophy, right? Because if you have a relatively low payment, you have a fixed interest rate. If you don't have a situation where your total principal is increasing because you're not paying
Yeah,
off
yeah,
the interest, then you have the opportunity cost of repaying your loans. So let's say I pay off all my student loans. I pay off $200,000 of student loans. I pay it off early. I work really, really hard and suffer. It's like, well, what else could you have done with that money
yeah,
that could have resulted in you having a higher income or a more successful practice? Could you have done
yeah,
more marketing to attract new patients? Could you have, started some type of online product or service or thing that would bring you in some, side revenue, right? So I
yeah.
think paying off your loans early can be a huge mistake in that opportunity cost because you then don't have that money to utilize in other endeavors that could make you more money in the long run.
Yeah, I think
Um,
like anything, you have to evaluate what's the upside of doing this, what's the downside. I look at it in my situation, which obviously everybody's situation is different. In my situation, there's no upside to paying it off early. Like, it's a low payment. My principal goes down every month. I It's no big deal to make the payment. You know what I mean? Like, it's not burden to me, where it's like, if somebody came along and they're like, "Oh, we're going to pay off your student loans," I'll be like, "Don't care." Like, it makes
right.
no difference to me. That money that goes out every month is insignificant to me. And so, and it's not because I'm filthy rich or anything else, but it's just, I make more than what that is, that doesn't mean anything to me, because it's manageable, whatever. If you're in a different situation, you may have a different conclusion, but for me, I'm worried about it, but that's because I lived at home. I drove a car with 170 or 180,000 miles on it. When I was going back and forth to school, I was trying to make money on the side. I used to, when I was at Logan, none of the people in my class knew how to work on their cars. And so they would, like, if somebody needed brakes done on their car, uh, I would do it. They'd be like, "Well, the shop's going to charge me $500." And I think, "Well, I'll do it for 250. And then you just have to buy the brake pads, which were going to be another, what, $50 or something." So they'd pay me $300 instead of 500. And I would do it in the parking lot. Like, I would just bring a jack and
Just
some
go out
tools,
there.
and I'd go out in the parking lot, and I've changed multiple of my friends' brakes in the parking lot of Logan, just for some extra cash, because I knew how to do it. It didn't take long at all. I can't even wrap my head around somebody paying me $250 to do a brake job because it was so easy, but they were going to get charged twice as much. So they were happy to do it. And it's, I used to bring my lunch to school every day, and my friends used to make fun of me because I had a bag lunch with like a sandwich,
Yeah.
some chips, but I have a low student loan payment.
Right. Yeah, you get, it's industriousness. And I think it's just making good financial decisions. I think it's very easy to not make good financial, like my car is paid off. A lot of those other things are good decisions. For your finances, I think a lot of us, I've watched people fall into the trap where, they fall in love with another classmate during school. So then they marry a chiropractor. So now you've got double the amount of
Yeah.
chiropractic student loans. You both still have all those issues. Then they go get, you know, an associate position. Maybe they have a fairly decent paying associate position. Both of them end up leasing or buying new cars. So then they have their car payments. And
Yep.
then they get together and they buy a house, right? And now they have their house payments. So they got, car loans, house loans, student loans, and then they have a kid. And it's like, it's just now as great as that life may be and as fulfilling as that life may be. And that's not to say, I'm not saying that that's not fulfilling or that it's not the right thing to do. But that is a hell of a way to stack up debt on top of yourself.
Yep. There was
And
a guy,
many, many chiropractors do that.
100%. I mean, you just described, a percentage of the profession. I don't know what percentage, but it's a decent percentage. And it wouldn't be hard to find someone with that story. And actually, one of my clients, I had this conversation just this week. He's been doing the build out. He's a handy guy, so he's doing his own build out to save some money, which I applaud him for. And we were just talking about a couple things, and he made the comment about like it crossed his mind to like get a different car because he drives like an old Toyota Tacoma, that probably has, it's a 12, 15-year old truck, probably has, 100 and 200,000 miles on it or something, and he kind of made some comment about like what his patients would think. And I said, let me tell you something right now. I said, first of all, a lot of them aren't even going to know what you drive. I said, second of all, it doesn't matter what they think of what you drive. I said, thirdly, you can't afford a nice car. And I said,
Right.
because the nicest car you're thinking about buying isn't nice. I said, the other day, I was driving behind a Lamborghini SUV. That's a nice car. It costs as much as my house did. I said, so
Right.
I said, I've never owned a nice car in my entire life. So if you're trying to buy something that's going to impress people, you can't afford to buy something that's going to impress people. So why put yourself in a bad situation to impress people that aren't going to be impressed anyway?
And that's exactly right. And especially, I mean, if you just sometimes people need a little bit of like a mirror so that they can take a look at themselves, right? And you're like, you are currently doing your own build out, right? Do you really have nice new car money? Right. If you did have nice new car money, you wouldn't be in there with hanging
Hammer
hanging drywall and doing stuff like that. And it's like, and that's
Yeah.
not to insult, but it's like, look at where you're at right now, man. Like you are not in a position to do this.
Like I said, I'm not above it. I told him, I said, and I don't talk about numbers. I don't talk about, see, here's the reason I think numbers are stupid. And tell me how you feel about this, because you've been in the profession long enough to know that people brag about stuff. The reason I don't think numbers matter in the sense of how many people you're seeing per month, how much money you're collecting, is it's only a tiny little piece of the puzzle. You don't know what their cost of living is. You don't know what their expenses are. You don't know what their contentment level is. You don't know anything about that person other than what numbers are telling you, which are probably inflated. If
Yeah.
if chiropractors are telling you numbers, and especially if they're excited about telling you numbers, they're lying to you. And but they tell you nothing. And it's like my one of my buddies posted on Instagram the other day. He asked a question to a bunch of chiropractors, and he was like, would you rather have a coach that has a $10,000 car with with $1 million in the bank, or $100,000 car with $10,000 in the bank? And most people said the $1 million in the bank, but not everybody did. And that's a freaking shame because
Right. Yeah.
it's like, why would we admire someone? This is society. You admire someone who looks a certain way because they have a certain car, or they have a certain house, or they have a certain whatever. And I'll tell you from my experience, some of the most pain in the butt patients I ever had that complained about money and were, you had to chase them down for stuff, were people that had the nicest cars. And some
Yeah.
of the people who didn't have nice cars, they lived within their means and they had no problem paying their bills. And I just, those things do not impress me.
Uh, I've noticed that 100%. And when I first opened, I was kind of going for like that higher end type of patient because I wanted there to be no issues to like treatment plans,
Yep.
no like trying to get people into packages and things like that to be relatively little resistance. And they're some of the worst patients to work with. And so like my practice now
Yeah.
is almost entirely kind of like blue collar
Yep.
or like bartenders, waitresses, waiters, mechanics, construction workers. And I do have lawyers and nurses and stuff like that, but for the most part, I focus on kind of people who are in service industry or in those kind of blue collar professions, and they're much more appreciative. They're much more grateful, and I enjoy my days in practice a lot more that way. And to your point about the numbers can be very misleading. I'll use this as an example, not to brag, but just so that people can kind of understand, especially the students coming out, right? So I had an acquaintance that I knew from school. He graduated a little bit before me and opened up a practice. And he was talking to me about his practice. And so it's like him, he's got like 2 or 3 different CAs. He's seeing a bunch of people. They're doing
Yep.
a bunch of modalities, bringing in a bunch of money. And so when we started talking about our numbers, now I have this office that's tiny. I have no one helping me out. It's just me. We start talking about revenue numbers, and then we start talking about take home, right? So he has
That's the
much more
number.
revenue than me. So
Yep.
if he was to tell you how much he brings into the clinic every month, you'd be
Yep.
like, wow, I wish I was making that much money in my
Yep.
clinic every month. But by the time he was done paying all his people, paying the mortgage, or not the mortgage, the rent on his space and all of those expenses, I actually had almost $10,000 more monthly net take home in my practice than him. Now, if you were to stand in both of our practices, you would point at him and say he's the more successful chiropractor, right? But if you were to compare our finances month to month, every month I'm getting ahead of this guy.
Yep.
That's not to say that he can't make changes or that he can't add things or whatever, but you have to be careful of that because you walk in, someone has a beautiful, huge office, tons of employees. They give this sense of, yeah, this is a medical office. There's a lot of people here. They're employing people. This guy must be making great take home. And as you increase that revenue, a lot of times people don't watch how much the expenses are increasing because payroll is not a tiny expenditure on your business. And so for me, I always thought that that was interesting because you have to be very careful looking from the outside when you don't know what's going on deep in the books.
Yeah. And that's honestly the people that I have seen, and I've worked with several hundreds of chiropractors at this point, not thousands, hundreds. I'm not going to overstate my worth. But I've worked with hundreds of chiropractors, and to my knowledge, now there's always exceptions to the rule. The only ones that I've ever worked with who have gone from not making money to their heads above water in a stable place. So obviously that's different for every person, but the idea is I'm drowning, I'm not drowning, and I'm not worried about drowning next month. The people that I have seen go make that transition the fastest are people who are running a micro practice. Like they're doing it by themselves, out of a room, out of a gym, out of another doctor's office. They're keeping expenses very low. They're keeping their practice very simple, oftentimes running cash practices, and they're just doing the route that you have taken. And I'll tell you, my best friend from chiropractic college, he went that route right out of school. And he did it because he had to. He did it because he had kind of dumped on his credit. He didn't have any money. He thought he had an associate job that didn't work out. And he was just stuck in a situation where it's like he has no options. And so he rented a room for cheap out of this Chinese medical doctor's office. And I had an upper cervical table that was the kind of table that he wanted. And I gave it to him and he was going to like pay me over time, like that was kind of the arrangement. And then he got started. And I always thought, like, I kind of was thinking, this is kind of sad. You know what I mean? Like I just, cause like my mindset at the time was like, oh, this is kind of sad and whatever. And he loves it. still to this day, he has a 2 room. He's got his own, it's his own space now, but it's literally 2 rooms. He has no waiting room. There's like, you walk in, it's like there's 2 rooms, and he works by himself, no staff, all cash. And it's low overhead, lot of meat on the bone, and he loves it. And we kind of jokingly talked about just the difference in how much I paid in rent versus what he had paid in all of his expenses. And you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars difference over the course of 5 or 10 years of just expenses. And now I look at it and I go, yeah, I think he was kind of a genius. Like, I think
Yeah.
it was like, I think it was smart. And I'm not saying everybody has to do that model, but man, it's a smart way to start.
It's the thing is, and maybe it just comes from the massage practices, like because I was very used to that model, but I
Yeah.
knew that you could be very profitable very quickly, right? And with chiropractic even more so because you're a little bit more time leverage with chiropractic because the adjustment takes as long as it takes, but it certainly isn't a fixed amount of time,
Yeah.
right? So however many people that you can schedule and you can comfortably treat, you can do, and so you're much more time leveraged than massage by where you're
Yeah.
locked into an hour long session.
Yep.
But, I've done this model for now, I guess, 11 years, a little more than 11 years, and I just can't see I can't ever see wanting to do it differently, right? I can't see myself wanting to deal with having employees that can get sick or need to go on vacation or
Yeah.
have their cars break down. I can't see myself wanting to add those layers of complexity, especially because with chiropractic, with online booking and online scheduling and all these different things and text message reminders, email reminders, everything automated, you can take so much pressure off of yourself that really all I'm doing is greeting people, treating them.
Yeah.
My charting and documentation flow is very quick and simple, lots of check boxes, lots of drop down menus. And so the amount of pressure on me is very, very low. And once you train your patient base to use your online booking and to not be blowing you up trying to change their appointments to do that
Yeah.
themselves, there's very little that you actually have to do on your own to keep the wheels turning, and it's very, very profitable. So, you have a very low level of complexity to your operation, and you have very high output in terms of like your revenue and your profit. And so it's a good place to be. I can see the benefit of having a larger office, being able to serve more people, having associates underneath you. So maybe one day I would go that route, but I'm very, very happy with this style of practice. And it's allowed me to have a lot of freedom, a lot of individual control over every aspect of my life, which is great.
Yeah. That's actually something that, that's a transition that I made getting out of practice and into what I do now, because I actually have a similar thing where a lot of people that work with chiropractors and are doing SEO and websites and all this other stuff, they have a huge team. I don't do that. Like, I don't work that way. Like, I work with, I have either software helping me out, or I have people working remotely that I have helped me as needed. You know what I mean? So it's like, this person helps me when I have something that I need, but I don't have employees. Like, I don't have people that show up and are on payroll and things, because it keeps things simple. And now I realize that there's a cap on what I can do, doing it that way. But I'm with you. I enjoy the freedom. I enjoy the flexibility. I enjoy the the lack of headaches that are along with doing it this way. And I don't see, because I've had people approach me wanting me to do like more. Like, it's, they're it's like, build it out this way, change it this way. Don't you want to have, like, I want to take over the world and build an empire. And I'm like, yeah, the younger me probably would have been really excited about that. And now I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm like, yeah, I like simple. Like, I like
Yeah.
simple that works, efficient, simple. I'm on board with that.
I you can't really put a dollar value on peace of mind. And I think having fewer moving parts, being individually responsible for everything. Now, granted, if you drop the ball on something, you drop the ball. There's no one to
Yeah.
point the finger at,
Yep.
right?
It's
There's no
you.
one to pick up your slack. So if you're an undisciplined person, if you're a
Yeah.
disorganized person, if you're a flaky person, this is an awful business model for you. Now, chiropractic kind of
Listen,
would be
you
anyways,
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You shouldn't be a chiropractor if that describes you.
right? But if you can stick to things and if you're the type of person who is disciplined and focused and you aren't flaky, then the peace of mind that you get from just handling everything individually and automating as much as humanly possible is huge, because you don't have any of those personnel problems or those interpersonal issues that you have to deal with once you start adding people to your team.
Yep.
And you also run into a point where you can kind of build this beast right out of your employees, where now this whole thing requires them. And that's what I see with some of my friends in associate positions now, is they're almost afraid to leave their associate position now after a year and a half after being graduated, because they don't think they could do a practice without these CAs,
Yep.
or they couldn't run a practice without these rehab techs, or without the person answering the phone and scheduling patients.
Yep.
They're like, they've lost, well, not that they lost, they never learned how to make this stuff function in and of themselves. And so now it's like they're trained to the point that if they opened an office, to feel comfortable, they'd need this whole massive team, which then, like we said, your revenue is getting eaten up by your expenses.
Yeah. You wouldn't believe well, you probably would. I think people listening would not believe. I think you would understand, but the number of people that I have given permission to start a small practice is staggering, because I get into that conversation a lot where typically associates, you just seriously nailed it right on the head. It's typically associates who've worked in one environment. Maybe they saw their chiropractor before they went to chiropractic college and it was a similar thing. And their idea of what it looks like to run a practice is these multiple clinics, multiple doctors, multiple associates, multiple everything. It's like, that's what they think it is. And they're just like, I don't even know how to do this. I can't do it. It's impossible. And I'm like, it kind of is impossible, but that's not the only way to do it. And when you give them permission, because number one, you have to let them know that you can do it a different way. Number two, the thing is, you have to let them know that you're not less of a doctor by doing it that way. Like, there's a pride element to, I think that some people have to get over to do a micro practice. And at this point in my life, I don't think that way at all. But I know that if 24, 25-year-old Jerry, if you would have sat down and had this conversation about, hey, start small, save money, whatever, the pride inside of me that's going to be a real doctor and it's going to change the world and it's going to change my community and blah, 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 that person would have had a very hard time humbling himself and doing what was best for me. And
Yeah.
I think that's a shame.
And what's horrible to me about that is you watch people build this monstrous practice and then chain themselves to it. I mean, like, how hard you have to work, how many people you have to see, how many visits they have to come in for to make an office with like a 30, 40. I mean, I've heard of offices that have $80,000 a month operating costs.
Yep.
I mean, you've got to be pulling in 100,000, 120,000. I mean, you have to be pulling in six figures monthly from the community to keep the wheels on that bus. And the amount of stress and the amount of headache that creates, there's so many moving parts. I mean, I just can't even imagine. Whereas, like, to keep the lights on at my office, my advertising running, like to make my practice run all in is 3,500 a month.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do that. I frequently do that in the first few days of the month.
Yeah.
And then you are just in the green for the rest of the month. So
Yeah.
it's like, I can't imagine putting myself in a position of having to produce constantly at that level just to keep the thing open. It's mind-boggling to me that anybody chooses to do it that way.
The first eye-opening experience I had with that very same scenario is I had a friend that graduated a little bit after I did. And part of me was a little jealous. Like, he had had a career kind of before chiropractic. Like, he was similar to you, where it's like he was older than me and he was more equipped to be successful early. And he just kind of jumped, leaped me and was doing well. He had multiple docs. He had this big clinic. And I just was super impressed. Like, I was just kind of like, man, this guy's, couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, but kind of jealous. And we sat down one time, we're just talking shop. And that was the story, where when we really sat down and had a conversation about it, it was $65,000 to $70,000 a month required to break even. And I remember sitting there thinking, heck no, like, you can freaking have that. Like, because he was bringing home more than me, but it was like $5,000 more. And I was like, you're dealing with all this
Yeah.
headache for 5 grand? Like, no way. Like, no way in the world would I do that. And it was just, to me, was I just saw him and thought to myself, instead of thinking like, man, he's got the best situation in the world, I thought, that's a freaking nightmare. I wouldn't take that if you gave it to me.
Yeah. I think I have that exact same. I would pay $5,000 a month to not work in an office like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, if
Yeah.
you're talking about that difference, I would give that up to not enter into that environment. Now, granted, maybe that's us personality wise. I do
Yeah.
feel like, entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs that run small solo businesses, we tend to value different things. So, like,
Yep.
I value only working 4 days a week. I value only working
100%.
on the days that I want to, right? Like, whereas I have friends who run those larger practices, they don't mind working 5 or 6 days a week. They don't mind
Yeah.
working all day on those days a week. And they like being in that bigger, larger office. So it there's no I say it all the time. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to practice,
Yeah.
but there certainly are much easier and much more difficult ways to practice on yourself, especially when you're right out of school or you're out of going from your associate time period into running your own practice. There
Yeah.
are ways that you can make that much more difficult on yourself, and the bigger offices tend to be a great way to make things harder on yourself.
I think that's a fair way of putting it. And I actually don't even care if somebody wants to have a huge practice. Like, to me, it makes no difference. I just think it's a shame that there's a bunch of young chiropractors out there who think they can't have a small practice, or think that they're less than because they have a small practice. And I just think that that's silly. I mean, there are chiropractors that just, they don't want to. I made a meme a couple weeks ago, or maybe a month or so ago, kind of joking about the last patient rescheduling, so you get to go home early, and it was like,
Yeah.
being happy. And there's always people that comment about, I never go home early. Like, I don't even know why you would be excited about that. Why would you? And I can't wrap my head around that personality, because for me, it's like, oh wait, I get to go home. I mean, even if I had nobody to go home to, I just get to go home, sit on my couch like an hour
Yeah.
early. Sweet. That's awesome.
Well, it's
But
like, what else are you going to do? If there's no one there to treat, and let's assume that, like, because my office is very efficient, right? So if there's no one there to treat, there's nothing to do, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't need to clean anything. I don't need to rearrange anything.
yeah,
I don't need to catch up on documentation because my documentation is done as soon as the patient leaves the office. Like,
yeah,
so, I never go home early. I'm always grinding. It's like, if there's nothing to do in my office, I'd be sitting there twiddling my thumbs. I might as well twiddle my thumbs at home while
yeah,
watching Netflix or having a beer, right?
yeah, yeah,
You know, so, maybe that's like a systems, failing, right? If you are so behind on documentation or whatever, like, you have things to do at the
yeah,
office when no one shows up, then sure, maybe your systems aren't working the way that they ought to be very efficient. And there's something to be said that you could always be tweaking your marketing. You could always be creating content. You could always be calling patients that haven't been in a while. Like, sure, there's things to do, right? But those things are
yeah,
getting done in my practice too. And so I can go home if that new patient, especially new patients, I don't mind that. New patient doesn't show up last visit of the day, I'm out 30 minutes early. Like, let's go.
yeah, yeah. I don't. Some people just kind of get like, they kind of look down on chiropractors for feeling that way. But I was always happy to go home early. Like, I don't, even if I had a stack of paperwork that I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah, just do
So
it before your shift next time. Yeah.
yeah. So tell me this. You kind of talked about systems. What are some of the things that you feel like you can't live without? Like, if somebody's going to do a micro practice, and it's like, you talked about texting, online schedulers, stuff like that. Like, what are some of the things that are just like, if you're going to do this style, here's a few things that you definitely want to have going for you. Otherwise, you're making your life harder than it has to be.
Yeah. So for me, I always feel like I should get sponsored by them because I plug them every time someone asks me this question. But so I could not run this practice the way that I do without JNAP, right? And so JNAP,
See,
if you're
I knew you were
listening,
going to say that, by the way.
sponsor me, give me free EHR. I would love to pay $0 a month, and I'll plug you every time I go anywhere. But anyways, um, it really couldn't do it without JNAP. So JNAP has a combination of features, right? It's an EHR system. It comes with online scheduling. It comes with automated email and text message reminders. So your patients are getting, in my case, they get an email the day before their appointment, and they get a text message 3 hours before their appointment, whether that's a treatment or a new patient visit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can email them a link. It automatically, when they make their first visit, it emails them a link to fill out their intake form, which has all of their health history, everything that's bothering them, everything that I
Yeah.
need. So when they come in, I already have that completely digitally ready to go. I just populate an exam form and I just get straight into the history, straight into the exam, straight into the treatment.
Yep.
Um, they track all of your numbers. So if I want to know how many new patients I've had, that's all easily accessible. I want to know how much revenue, if I want to know, how many visits, the PVA, all that stuff is built in. Um, and so that makes the way that I practice possible. And it's like, I think I pay something like $100 a month. I think the price has maybe gone up a little bit since I locked mine in. But it's just an unbelievably low cost way to get all those features. If you tried to bundle those from different types of programs that all
Yeah.
kind of overlap, you'd be paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month doing that. The the other one that I use that is very, very helpful is an app, which I think costs about $15 a month. It's kind of like Netflix. It's called Sideline. And what that does is it allows you to have a separate phone number that rings through onto your cell phone so that you can give
Oh,
that as
nice.
the office number. So when patients are texting me or patients are calling me, it's going to my office number through this app on my phone.
Yep.
And that keeps all of my personal communications and all of my business communications separate without me having to have a landline in the office or anything like that.
Very nice. That's a
Um,
nice.
the other feature about that is you can set up autoresponders and you can also set up like copy paste type things. So, I was getting bogged down a lot in the beginning. People would ask me what your hours are. Well, I had some copy pastes like in my notes app. So I'm going back and forth, copying and pasting from my notes app to this app to try and text people the hours. And then they ask if you would take insurance and then they ask something else, right? So I have these like 3 or 4 most commonly asked questions, and you just tap the button, these prompts pop up, you click it and it texts it to the patient, right? And so if I need to go in there and change anything about it, I can if I want to be more specific or less specific. But so that helps a lot with automating some of your conversation. And then you can also forward everything to voicemail and it has an auto text response. So for me, because I'm frequently treating patients, if you call my number, it goes straight to voicemail. And on the voicemail, it's like, hey, we're treating patients right now. The best way to get a hold of us is to text us. Feel free to text us at this number. Da, da. But as soon as the phone call goes to voicemail, it also automatically sends them a text without me having to do anything that says, hey, thank you for calling Apex Chiropractic. This is Dr. Poulson. Best way to communicate with us is via text. How can I help you today? Right. And so that helps me keep my flow going where I'm not worried about missing a phone call. Just, between patients here and there, like I'll poke my head out. I'll see the next patient's arrived. I'll check my phone. I'll respond to a text if I need to, put my phone back in my pocket and then call the next patient back.
Yeah.
So those things, automating the intake procedure, automating, where the patients can book online. I know some people don't like to do that, but I love it. The automated text message reminders, the app to make your communication more efficient and quicker. All of those things work together in my office to take a tremendous amount of pressure off of me to where I'm manually handling not very many tasks related to keeping the business running. And so those are huge. And then obviously, Instagram and the social media platforms, that's where I spend a lot of when I'm working on the business, it's usually in content creation, copywriting, or like strategic planning for the
Yeah.
social channels, because that's where all my new patients come from. So I don't spend a lot of operational time outside of treating patients or documenting on my practice really at all, because all these things are automated. I spend all my time on social and strategic planning.
Yeah. That those few little things are so important. And there are chiropractors out there, and I'll just, because obviously you don't have this problem because you did the massage for so long, but there are chiropractors out there that for whatever reason feel bad about uh, kind of laying the groundwork for communication, where it's kind of like they answer the phone because they feel like they have to answer the phone. They're answering the email because they have to, and they're not trying to funnel people to the thing that's most efficient to them because they maybe feel bad about it, or they feel like they're going to miss people. And I've one of my Jerryisms is I'll tell people people don't get mad at you for how you run your business. They get mad because they thought you ran your business differently. So as
Yes.
long as you're transparent about how you do things, and good patients don't fall off trees, you train them, you grow them, you create them from the person who comes in by instructing them and being transparent. So it's like, if you're being transparent about this is how we do things, here's what you expect, you minimize so much frustration on the patient's part, because there's not this mismatch between expectations and reality. But if you're just constantly letting them kind of dictate how they communicate with you, or letting them dictate what they do, and you're not taking control over that, you're killing your efficiency.
Yes. And that results in people think that by answering the phone or doing these things or bending over backwards for scheduling and stuff like that, that they're delivering a higher quality experience or they're delivering like a better patient experience. But all you're doing is you're burdening yourself, and eventually you'll become less efficient to where that's going to catch up with you in some way or another, right? The screws start to come loose, the wheels start to fall off. So you have to be very careful about that, because you'll eventually result in you getting burnt out, your employees getting burnt out, or just the level of experience dropping across the board for everyone. So you really have to be careful about doing that. And that's, when anyone finds me, if you go to my link, which goes to the website, beautiful website that you built for me, by the way, plug Rocket
Thank you.
Chiro. Jerry built me a wonderful website. It works fantastically. And I absolutely love it. The patients love it. Everyone who's commented about the website says it's great. It's very
Thank you.
simple, very easy to use. But from the moment that you get directed to my website, everything says, you're going to book online. If you have a question, you can text us here, right? And then they book online. And then when they're leaving my office after the first visit, I hand them a card. Hey, by the way, again, I'm Dr. Poulson. This is Apex Chiropractic. If you need to get a hold of me, the best way is to text me at this number. If you need to see when your appointment is, you need to reschedule your appointment or do anything related to your appointments, you can do it all from the website.
Yep.
If the website gives you a problem or you have any questions, send me a text and I'll help you figure it out. And so I train them that way. And then inevitably something happens, they miss their appointment, right? Or, hey, my kid's sick, I'm not gonna be able to come in today. I text the patient back, hey, no problem, things happen. Go ahead and rebook for whatever time works for you online at apexchiropractic.org. So I'm constantly reinforcing
Yep.
that anything related to scheduling or appointments is on you. You go online, you do it, you book. Now, practice management companies or people might say, well, you're going to hurt your retention. And it's like, I don't think that it has hurt my retention that much. Obviously, someone will forget to book, and then it'll be longer than it needs to be, before they
Yeah.
come back in again. But if you have good follow-up strategies where you're tracking patients that haven't been in longer than a month, or tracking patients that are not following the treatment plan, you're following up with them. It's very easy to get those people back on track and to keep your retention protocols and your retention systems strong.
Yeah.
Now, does the fact that you have to book online, you can't have a conversation with me, turn away some patients? Sure. I'm sure there's some patients who would love to chat with me for 30 minutes about their shoulder before actually making their appointment. But I don't mind losing those patients when you're just going to have a much, much, much easier flow through
Yeah.
your whole practice.
I think it's really important to know what hills to die on when it comes to your practice. It's like, if you decide these are the days I want to work, these are the hours I want to work, this is how we're going to schedule, this is how you're going to communicate with me, this is how I'm going to handle insurance or not handle insurance. When there are certain things that when you just define the parameters of your practice, you just decide that that's the hill you're going to die on. And I think that that's perfectly fine to do. The problem you have with a lot of chiropractors is they define their parameters and they're constantly going against them. They're constantly doing different, or they're not okay with the consequences of that. It's like, if, I always use the cheapest chiropractor in town analogy. It's like, if you're not committed to being the cheapest chiropractor in town, you have to accept the fact that the people who are looking for the cheapest chiropractor in town aren't going to be your patient. And that's okay. It's perfectly fine not being the cheapest chiropractor in town. But when someone calls and the only thing they care about is how much is that visit going to cost, that's it. That's their most important thing. And they know they can go to the joint for whatever, and it's going to be undercutting what you're charging. Don't lose sleep over that. Just understand that, just send them there. Tell them like, oh, well, go there instead. That's not your person. And it's okay for them not to be your person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, when if you've taken the time to develop your skills and you deliver an excellent adjustment, right?
Yeah.
And this is not to brag or to seem arrogant or conceited or whatever. I know that I can adjust, I can run circles around anyone that is probably working at the joint, because it's majority new
Yeah.
grads. I know that they haven't put the time in. I know my skills are there, right? So I am not going to value via dollar signs my adjustment at the same level that you would value the joint's adjustment. And my patients get it. They get that my sessions cost $70 a visit for a 10-minute visit for an adjustment,
Yeah.
because this is not the joint. And if you
Yep.
want, you can go get a $29, $39 adjustment at the joint. and you'll
100%.
be back,
And
you'll be
that's
back in a
okay.
couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Right.
It's okay if you want to do that. And it's you have to be comfortable with that, with the person making a decision different than the decision you want them to make.
Yes. Yes. And just everything about it. When you're breaking your own rules or you are going against your systems, you're creating more decisions, more thought processes, more things you have to think about, more decisions you have to make throughout the day, and it burdens you as the doctor.
Yeah.
And so when people are undisciplined in their policies or the way they handle things, or they're constantly doing things different for different patients, you have way more just stuff to think about that's burdening you throughout the day. I
Yeah.
never, like when I'm at the office, I never stop and go, I wonder what I'm going to do next. Right.
Yeah.
Like from the moment a patient walks in, all the way through the treatment, all the way through informing them about the packages to scheduling for the next visit, everything happens the way that I do it. All communication happens the way that I do it. And I never change it. It's never different. And so I never have to stop and think or try and make a decision about what I'm going to do next. And that makes every day just flows super well. I'm always surprised. I'll treat the last patient, I'll look up and it's lunch, right? And I treat the
Yeah.
last patient after lunch, and now I'm going home for the day. And it's always funny because that just sneaks up on me, because you don't have to actively think that hard while you're working, because you've minimized the amount of decisions that need to be made. And that's what systems really are ultimately for, is to reduce the amount of thinking and decisions that need to be made.
Yeah, I think a lot of people they think that structure is a prison, and really structure is like guardrails on a racetrack that allow you to go faster and faster and faster because you're defining the parameters of this. And now you get to focus on optimization. You get to focus on like, here's the parameters which I'm going to operate. And now I'm going to do it as best I possibly can, as fast as I possibly can. It's like, now you can really go. And when you have no parameters, then it's just like wandering around, and you're inefficient. It's impossible to be efficient without parameters.
100%. And I think especially chiropractic, when you're doing an adjustment focused practice, is you do need a certain level of efficiency to get the amount of patients in a day that you
Yeah.
need to treat. And look, I'm not treating 100 people a day, right? Like I would consider myself on the lower end of like medium volume. I see between 25 to 35, maybe 40 patients if my hair is just on fire that day.
Yeah.
Right. But so, it's not a ton of people, but if you're going to be treating 35, 40 people, you need your systems to flow. You can't have any backups in the waiting room. You can't have any problems and issues.
Yep. Yep. So let's talk about marketing a little bit. So I know initially you kind of had those first, I don't know if they were days or weeks or months of like, wait a second, nobody's like, I put out my shingle, nobody's wandering in. So, you have to kind of pivot. And I know you pivoted toward Instagram marketing. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about what led you into that, and then kind of how it's been kind of before and after that?
Yeah. So it's funny because when I opened up my practice, we were going through this really interesting transition with social media. It was right as Instagram was kind of turning from a platform where you shared photos
Mhm.
to a platform where you shared videos.
Yeah.
And when I opened, all those videos were like square videos. So it was like a box. It
Yeah.
wasn't the
Yeah.
tall vertical
Yep.
format like TikTok. And so Instagram and YouTube and everyone has now copied TikTok's vertical video format. And so I went through, if you go back way in my feed, you'll see a bunch of square videos of me adjusting patients. And that's from the time right before we made the transition into Reels.
Yeah.
But so I was kind of watching this happen, and I knew that video was going to be something that we could use, because massage is not very visually dynamic or entertaining. I mean, if you
Yeah.
took a time lapse and sped it up, maybe, but there is this very kind of entertaining aspect about watching people get adjusted. And so I knew that that was going to be something that we could use to get attention, and that was going to be more time leverage than, say, doing a spinal screening or doing a health talk.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I knew that I wanted to get into social. I just didn't know exactly how to make everything work. I'd never run any ads on social media or anything like that before. So when I got out of school, I knew that I wanted to start shooting some videos. I started, and some of my videos, the first ones are shot on a really bad quality camera. The audio is not very good. The lighting's not good. It looks like I'm adjusting patients in a dungeon.
Dude, that's
Right.
everybody's story.
Yeah. And, you slowly, as you're working, first it was
Yeah.
like I would have sessions where I just screwed up the microphone and there's no audio. I was like, oh, wonderful. Just wasted my time on that.
Yeah.
But you get better at the video quality, you get better quality lighting. I had specific lights installed in my room that I used with filming that are different than the lights I use when I'm treating.
Yeah.
And all that improves over time. But yeah, the first couple months, I mean, I was stressed. I mean, through September, October, November, I mean, I was sitting in my office. There's like nobody up there. I'm treating a few people. Um, and I would come home and I would tell, at the time, my fiance then, I would tell her, I was like, I think I might have made a horrible mistake. I think I'm torpedoing our lives. I shouldn't have tried to do this. I should have been an associate. I should have took, 50,000 a year for stability.
The
Like
mind
I
monsters were
really,
getting you.
yeah. So I was like, I really screwed this up. So I had someone reach out to me and they were basically, an advocate, someone who would do your ads for you and help you run them
Yeah.
on Facebook first. So I gave this guy a couple $1,000s. We started doing it. It was just not working. We're using like lead forms and no one's filling out the lead forms. I
Yeah.
even called, I'd gotten leads. I'd call people and they wouldn't even remember filling out the form
Yeah.
for who I was. They're like, who are you? Why are you calling? I'm not
It's
interested in the
mind
chiropractor.
boggling. Yeah.
I'm like, you spent 7 minutes filling out this form and giving me all your information, telling me about how your shoulder hurts. And now you don't even remember the form.
Yep.
So it just wasn't working. And I was about ready to do what I've heard many doctors tell me. Oh, we tried social media. It just didn't work for us.
Yeah.
Right. So a consultant reached out to me on Instagram and he basically wanted to do the same thing. I said, look, man, I appreciate it. I just got burned. I just burned like thousands of dollars working with this other guy. He goes, tell you what, let's hop on a call. I want to give you some free actionable advice. You start to do it. And once you have some new patients in your office, give me a call and we'll talk about actually working together. It's like, all right. We get on this call. He gives me some advice. I start implementing some of the things and I immediately start getting new patients, 3 or 4 or 5, new patients. And they came in, they were good. Like they were a pleasure to work with. They were real people. They paid me real money. And so I reached back out to him. His name's Shakur Smith, by the way, on Instagram. Shout out to Shax because he taught me the whole strategy that I use and everything that I've done to make my practice successful comes from the foundation he taught me.
Yeah.
Um, so anyways, I ended up paying him his fee and going through the whole process of learning how to create Instagram ads and follow up on DM conversations and comments and likes and stuff. And started then improving the quality of my videos and then running those videos effectively as ads to the community around my office.
Yeah.
And that made all the difference. I mean, we went from, 14 new patients a month, 17 new patients a month, something like that. In December, once I implemented everything that Shaq taught me, I think I had like 50, 55 new patients in December. And in January, we had like 80 new patients. And from December of 22 to current, I think we've only had 1 month where we had fewer than 50 new patients and all from social media. I mean, so it's just been an unbelievable game changer for my practice.
Yeah.
And so that's what I focus on. So it started with Instagram, which Instagram seems to work really, really well. It works best for everyone that I've talked to. And then I branched out into TikTok. Facebook still doesn't seem to work for me and I can't figure out why. So I just kind of gave up on it. And then I branched out into YouTube and now I'm actually getting new patients, not very often, but at least one every month or two will have found me on YouTube. And now YouTube's growing as well. So the social has just been huge for me.
Yeah. I think that there's so much there's so much potential there, but it is also one of those things that a lot of chiropractors try and they don't do well. And I do think that you have to have a plan, you have to have a strategy, you have to have something that's and one of the things, and tell me if you agree with this or not. I try to stress to people that the goal is interactions with people. Like you're trying to, it's not, you have to think about less of from a click standpoint or from an observation standpoint. It's like views, clicks, those things are fine. But if you can interact with someone, if you can, get into a conversation with them with a comment, if you can get into a conversation with them on a DM or something like that, if you can actually interact with them on more of a human level, to me, that's incredibly important and should be one of the primary goals of what you're trying to do on social media. So I mean, how do you feel about that? Or what are your thoughts?
I completely agree. And that's the core of the strategy. So to explain on Instagram, what makes Instagram work so well is that compared to other, like for example, on TikTok, if you want to send someone a DM, you have to follow them and they have to follow you.
Yeah.
So that's like a lockout type of
Yep.
scenario. Same thing on Facebook. If you message someone that you're not friends with on Facebook, it just goes into this folder that
The
most people
junk
don't even
folder.
know
Yeah.
exists.
Yeah.
But on Instagram, sometimes you end up in the junk folder, but most of the time you just end up in their actual DMs.
Yep.
And so you don't have to ask for a lead form where you're asking for their phone number or their email to reach out to them, because if they like your video, if they comment on your video, or if they follow you, you get a notification. And if you click on their name and you go to their profile, you can
Yep.
click the button that says send them a message. So
Yep.
you kind of have this lead capture built into Instagram, which is why I love Instagram as a platform. So let's say I make an ad, right? I make the ad, I boost it out on Instagram, it's showing to my local community, and then the likes, comments, and follows start to come in. Now I'm clicking on those notifications, messaging those people. Hey, this is Dr. Poulson from Apex Chiropractic. I noticed that you liked, commented on, followed.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to the chiropractor before? And that's a question, and most people feel the need to respond when a question has been asked to them. And so then I just take the conversation from there. No, you haven't, right? What's going on? Yes, I have, or no, did you like it? How long ago did you go? And then I invite them to come in and try out our practice and be a patient. So that was the whole strategy. And what's interesting about that and kind of proves your points is because like on Instagram now, I think I've got more than 140,000 followers.
Yeah.
It's a big page now, right? I'm not getting significantly more new patients a month at 140,000 followers on Instagram than I was when I had 3,000, 5,000.
Yeah.
Right. That what people think is important in social is not in terms of a chiropractic business. They think the follower count is important. They think the view counts are important. And those things are fun vanity metrics. Again, those are a good indicator that you're making at least decent content.
Yep.
Because enough people like your content that they want to stick around, they want to follow, they want to watch it. So it is it's not like it's useless. It's a good indicator that you're doing something that is resonating, but it's not going to really result in more revenue for your practice. Just like you said, those conversations where you're actually speaking with someone who exists and you're interacting with them, trying to understand where they're at, and then inviting them in to be a patient, that's what's going to make the biggest difference. What I will say is that as my following has increased, because I'm now the biggest chiropractor on Instagram in Dallas, so in my city, is I'm having far fewer of those one-on-one conversations and much, much more people they find my page, they see that I'm in Dallas, they go, this must be the guy. They click the link and they book an appointment without talking to me.
Yep.
And so what the organic social media growth and success has done for my practice is it's offloaded me from having to have so many conversations.
Yeah.
To where I don't spend
built,
much time DMing at all anymore.
Yeah. What it's done is those numbers have helped your authority is what it's done. And that's, what's funny is that you say that because I've never actually verbalized it, but I remember when I started Rocket Chiro, which used to be Black Sheep DC, and I started with 0. Like it was like I was following my own stuff, it was like one person. Right. And when I started getting a little bit of people coming in and like, paying some money to join this or to do this or whatever, I was thinking, well, if I have 200 people following me, then if I get 800 people following me, then I'm going to have 4 times the amount of income. And that's not true at all.
No.
There's not a correlation there.
It doesn't seem to make a difference at all, which is hilarious. I mean, some of the social platforms you can get paid now, which is kind of cool because like on YouTube, I do get paid for my like in ad revenue for the videos.
Yep.
So YouTube has been nice for that. That's making not a lot of money, especially not compared to my practice, but a couple $100s a month.
Yeah.
TikTok, you can get paid a little bit. It's very little. Instagram now is rolling out that same feature. So, there are some little incentives there, but yeah, the new patients come from those conversations. They don't come from like your video going viral. But I mean, it makes sense. If I've got 30,000 fans in Finland, well, what does that do for my practice?
Yeah.
Now, if you offer some type of telehealth service, if you offer, let's say you put together like a yoga program and you sell that online. So like I, for example, have online seminars, chiropractic seminars for technique and for social media marketing. And so that is actually something that does help is when I run ads or I create videos around that, people from all over the nation or all over the world can then go access and buy my online courses.
Yeah.
So that's actually leveraged. And that has helped a lot as the organic growth has increased. But my actual practice has been relatively the same as my following has increased.
I think it's really interesting that chiropractors need to really think about that. Like, cause there was back in the day when I first started, when I first closed my practice, there was a guy going around telling everybody that chiropractors need to have a podcast. Like, it's like, that's the thing. Like if everybody, the thing that's going to take your practice to the next level and blah, 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 is going to be a podcast. And I've always rolled my eyes at that because I was podcasting, quite a bit before I was doing the chiropractic stuff. And I'm like, podcasting is a worldwide thing. And if you're trying to get people to come into your practice and they got to be within 10 minutes of your practice, I don't know that it's the best way to market yourself as doing it. Now, obviously, there's things you can do to have like a local podcast, but most of the people that are, do that. So I think you have to take that in consideration when you're doing marketing as a chiropractor. And it's like, what are you trying to do? Does it make sense? Does it, because those people that, if you're interacting with somebody that's in Finland and they got to, come to your practice, that's probably not the smartest strategy if you're trying to get them to come in. So it's like, you need to make sure these people are, if you're trying to get someone into your physical practice, you need to make sure that you're talking to people that are in your physical area.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing that's interesting too to me about like the videos is like, I make the video content of me treating my patients. And then outside of the effort and time that goes into creating that video can then run as long as I want it to run as an
Yeah.
ad. So you're very much time leveraged. And so I don't do any in-person marketing events. I don't do any like table talks, spinal screenings, health fairs, nothing like that. But let's say I did, right? I could have my social media ads running while I'm giving a spinal screening, and now I'm marketing in that same time period. I've got all this different marketing
Yep.
going on because I'm doing in person and I'm doing online. So
Yep.
the thing that's great about the social is that it's time leveraged because I don't have to sit here and manage it. It's just running when I'm not doing anything. And it's very effort leveraged because you front load all of the effort into the creation and structuring of the ad. And then you can just continue to throw money at that and run it until it stops performing well. Um, and that's very powerful because you need, especially as a small business, you need as much leverage as you can get. Like we've talked about lots of ways today that you can get leverage. You can get leverage, financially, you can get leverage through your efficiency and your systems. And then now you can get leverage through your online marketing.
Yeah.
That's leveraged against your time. So I think those are all very important for a small business.
Do you have someone that helps you with content? Like what content ideas, video editing, what kind of help do you have with content?
I do now have an editor. So when I started, I planned everything, filmed everything, edited everything, copy wrote,
Which is
posted,
typical. Yeah.
everything myself. And then as soon as I was making enough money to offload that, I offloaded it because editing is a pain in the ass.
It
So,
is
so
100%.
yeah, now I have an editor. I have him on retainer. I pay him about $1,000 a month, and we have a set number of pieces of content that will be edited and produced every month. So what
And
I do is
is that part of the 3,500 that you said, like your operating expenses is the editor?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. So that gets rolled up into that along with my marketing expenses and the rent for the office.
Got it.
And so when I film in my office, I film it on all these different iPhones. I've got like 3 different iPhones to get different angles. And one of them is connected to a good microphone, a lav mic that I wear on my
Yeah.
shirt. So I take all those videos, I send them, upload them to the cloud. He downloads them from the cloud, chops it up into short form content for Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts, and long form content for full length YouTube videos. And then he
Nice.
uploads those back to the cloud. And then every weekend, I go get my YouTube videos and I upload them. And usually once or twice during the week, I'm posting some type of short form content across TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube Shorts. And that just goes every week. And so all I have to do is make sure that when a new patient books on their intake document, there's we're looking for volunteers to be on video for our social media. And there's a checkbox that says, yes, I'd like to be on video, or no, I wouldn't. So every time I have someone come in for a new patient exam, if they say, yes, they'd like to be on video, and I've kind of got everything set up and I feel like it would be a good session to film, then we just set up and we film it. And so as long as I'm consistently filming, we have a consistent output of content. And what's great about that is it's now created kind of a backlog, which I call the vault. So I've got
Yeah.
about two months worth of content in the vault, which is the cloud. And so even if I go on vacation or I don't film any sessions that week or whatever, when it's time to post my content for the week, I just go into the vault, pick a video that I like, write up the copy that's going to go with it, and then post it out.
Yeah, I that was something else I was going to ask, because I know that I was doing video testimonials when I was in practice, and I know that when I first started, like when I first thought about doing it and was started doing it, it was just awkward. It's like there's that, because you're doing something new, you think it's weird, and I was going to ask you about that as far as like filming patients. You said you have them sign something, which I was assumed that you did. Um, is that like awkward at first? And I'm assuming it now it's just kind of another day. But
Yeah, when I first started, it was a little bit awkward. Like And I still kind of kick myself because I'll say little things after each adjustment, which like I'll be like, I'll adjust someone, I get it, and I'm like, perfect, right? Or like adjust someone like awesome, right? And when you're watching it back on YouTube, I mean, you might watch like a 15-minute, treatment video, right? And it's like, I might say perfect after I adjust someone like 7 times.
Yep.
And so it made me realize like I try a little bit harder to just adjust someone and then stay quiet afterwards because I'm like, stop saying little things afterwards because you're on film. So
Yeah.
there's stuff like that. In the beginning, it was awkward because there's kind of an awareness that you're being filmed. So you're kind of thinking too much about what you're saying, or you're thinking too much about not giving like a weird response to something the patient says.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed is that as my comfortability being on camera increased, my patient's comfortability increased a lot too. But there's other things to that too. So if you set up big lights to light that are like not the natural lighting for the room,
Yeah.
that's going to make your patients freeze, right? They feel like they're being video interviewed on camera,
Yeah.
and patients clam up, they freeze up. They don't have as big a reactions, so your videos aren't as impactful because the bigger the patient reaction, the more over the top the reaction, the better that video does. Just
Yeah.
that's just a rule, right? So when I set up the cameras on tripods, they're in the corners of the room. They're very easy to kind of like out of sight, out of mind that the cameras are even there. There's no like flashing lights or blinking lights that show that anything's
You're
recording,
trying to make it as incognito as
as
possible.
incognito as possible. And so I had the overhead lights change. I had a series of 5 LED panels installed that have a bright white light, but I'll
Yep.
even change the lights over before the patient comes in so that the room is adequately lit. But it's not extra lighting sitting on stands. They're going to make the patient freeze up.
Yep.
And that's made all the difference. So that helps me be much more natural. And now it doesn't even bother me at all, right? Like talking on podcasts, doing stuff like this, it doesn't
Yeah.
bother me at all to be recorded. Um, but that's also helped the patients be more comfortable. And that made the whole interaction much more genuine, much more authentic. And once I got that down, that's where I really started to get those kind of magical videos, the ones that are going to get millions of views, which is where
Yeah.
the patient is very comfortable. They have this over the top reaction, and those make the best videos.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna. I was gonna. I think that's a great tip. It's as far as like making it as comfortable as possible. I mean, one of the things I tell people all the time is people only make it. It's only weird if you make it weird. Like
Yes.
and when you're uncomfortable, and it doesn't matter what it is, like if you are uncomfortable, it makes it worse. And if it's normal, and this even goes for like referrals, writing reviews, like some chiropractors are just uncomfortable about asking a patient to write a review. And I'm like, listen, if writing reviews are normal, like if you walked into your office, there's a poster on the wall it's got 3-4 different reviews that are on it from Google. And I was like, and you're seeing right out of the gate, you've created a review environment where this is normal here because you've created an environment where being on video is normal. And so when you create these environments, it's so much easier than if somebody goes in, they never saw a video on your social media. They never even thought about this. And then you're like, hey, can I put you on video? Yeah, it's weird because you didn't set the table. And so one of the things that is beneficial in situations like that is you have to just set the table to make it normal, to make it comfortable, because just like you said, the more comfortable a person is, the more natural that is, the better it is for everybody. And it's not a weird situation.
Yeah, and I think the way you handle it too is like what I do at my office is like, let's say they've checked on their intake form that they do want to be on video.
Yeah.
So when I go out to greet them, I'm like, "Hey, I'm Dr. Poulson. Nice to meet you. How you doing today?" Da-da. And I'm like, "By the way, I noticed on your intake form that you said that you'd be okay with filming the session today. Did you still want to do that?"
Yeah.
Right? If they say yes, then what I'll do is I'm like, "Cool. So I'm gonna go get everything set up. Just go ahead and have a seat here. I'll be back in about 2 minutes and we'll get started. Okay?" And then I run into the room. I start all the cameras recording without the patient being able to see. So I start everything, I get my
So
mic
good.
set up, I
Yeah.
get the lights flipped over so that all the cameras are recording before the patient sees any cameras or
Yep.
walks into the room. So then I go get the patient. All right, I'm ready for you. Nice to meet you again. Jessica, come on in, have a seat right here.
Yep.
So I noticed on your chart that you're having some neck pain. Tell me a little bit about what's going on. Right. And they walk past these cameras without ever seeing me interact with the cameras
So
or
good.
mess with my microphone.
Yeah.
So then I've already switched their brain over to tell me about what's wrong with your neck. And then they just start to stream of consciousness. And then I completely ignore that the cameras even exist for the
Yep.
remainder of the session. I just do my exam. Take their history. I do the treatment.
You can
I'll
edit it
even talk
later.
about
Yeah.
everything. Yeah. And then later my editor cuts anything that we don't want out. And
So
that
good.
keeps everything very genuine and very like low friction. And
Yeah.
that makes all the difference.
God, that's so good. Like I'm telling, like that is such a good piece of advice because you don't, once you start going down this path, uh, when people are uncomfortable, it's bad. Like it's just, it makes bad content. It makes bad videos. It makes bad testimonials. It makes bad when the doctor's uncomfortable. When you first get started, there's no way around being uncomfortable. You kind of have to work through it. But the sooner you can get to a place where everybody's is comfortable, because I know that, I don't know how you felt, like I hate my own voice. uh, I
Yeah.
think I look stupid on camera. My nose is crooked, which I never realized until, it's like there's things that are I hate about being on video, but after you've done it for a while, it's just like whatever,
It
it
gets
is what it
very
is.
second nature to you. And that's
Yeah.
important because that confidence comes across to the patient. And the other thing is too, the more that you do this, if you decide to do this, the you're going to attract patients that found you through social.
Yep.
So the idea of even being on video and treatment is just kind of second nature to them. So when I
Yep.
first started, I did have quite a few patients that are like, no, I don't really want to be on video. And now I'll have patients who they didn't check that they wanted to be on video on their intake form, so I don't ask. We'll sit down and I'll start asking them the history. They're like, wait, are you going to record this? Like, and I'm like, well, no, like I only record once if we've talked about it and I have your permission. They're like, oh, I definitely want to record it. I want to be able to show my friends. Like, all right,
Yeah.
well, give me a second. Let me set everything up and then we'll restart. Right.
Do
So
you
you'll get
send
that
them
too.
out at that point and then come back?
No, I don't send them out. Then at that point, if they're that comfortable with it that they're
Yeah.
requesting to
Yeah.
be
Yeah. Yeah.
filmed, I will set up the cameras, put my mic on, whatever, sit back down, and then we'll start. Because usually these are people who are very familiar with being on video, or maybe they're social media influencers or something where they want to use it
Yep.
for content on their
Yep.
channel. That's the other thing I do is I always ask patients, if they'd like to be tagged as a
If you could
collaborator
tag
on the
them. Yep.
video,
Yep.
which is great because then that goes onto their feed as their video too. And all their friends and family now have
Yep.
exposure to your page and your
Yeah.
video. So that's a
100%.
great way to get referrals. So
Yeah, 100%. So many chiropractors, even on Facebook, which is not obviously, you said you don't really do Facebook, but I always tell people, if you use your Facebook page as a local networking tool, when you interact with another business, like go tag them on your page. If you see something that they're doing on their page, that they're like Valentine's Day's coming up, it's like if the local florist has got something going on, repost it on your page. Like you're providing value to the people in your local area. Like you're building relationships by just simply adding a tag. I mean, it's just so
and
silly.
they'll reshare every time I go because my Instagram is getting a little bit bigger. So every time I go anywhere, like to a restaurant or something, I went to a nice restaurant last night. Sat at the bar. There was like nice lighting for the bottles, so I took a photo of the bottles behind the bar, and I posted it to my story, and I tagged the Tango Room, which is where I was.
Yeah.
And 15 minutes later, whoever's in charge of the Tango Room social media account then reshared that onto their story,
And it's all
which now
local.
has my account,
Yep.
right? So now, if anyone, and I don't know if I'm going to get a new patient for that, but that's not what it's about. It's just about doing that, building that habit of shouting people out, and then a lot of times they're going to feel compelled to shout you out,
You're
and you get
integrating
more exposure
yourself
that way.
you're integrating yourself into a worldwide network in a local way. That's the way to use social media. It's like, how can I use this to leverage my local? Like if you obviously have the other stuff going on that you can benefit from people that aren't local, but the bulk of what you're doing is still the bulk of your business and income is coming from locals. So it's like, understanding that this is a worldwide tool, but how do I connect with people locally? Like it's so smart. It's the only way to do it. Otherwise you're wasting time because you're building followers in India or something. And it's like, they mean nothing to you.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And it's just important not to get too down on yourself because you could build an incredible practice with like 2 to 500 local followers,
Yeah.
right? Whereas someone might have 100,000 followers across the world and not have much of a successful practice as you do because your following is local. And so you can't get too hard on yourself when you have low following counts, low view counts, low share counts, things like that. Some of those metrics are useful. Like if you have a high amount of shares or a high amount of saves on a video, that's a great indication that that's providing value. Because if it's so valuable that someone wants to watch it again later because they save it,
Yeah.
or if it's so valuable that they send it to a friend, now maybe they're talking shit about you with their friend, but if
Yeah.
it's so valuable, I'm
I'm sure
sure
I
a
get
lot of
some of
my
that.
shares are chiropractors just being like, look at this fucking idiot. Um, but if it's so
You
valuable
and
that
me
people are
both.
right, yeah. So I'd say maybe 50% of the shares are just other chiropractors who are jealous of us, right? But
Yeah.
50 is people who thought it was so valuable that they wanted their friend or someone else to see it.
Yeah.
And that also increases your reach. So you can look at shares and saves as a great metric for how valuable your content is. But you just want to avoid getting too caught up in the vanity metrics or getting down on yourself and feeling like, oh, well, this isn't working for me.
Yeah, I think it's this sort of goes back to the idea of the micro practice. I just don't think chiropractors should be crapping on small starts. It's just I mean, I've never had a huge online following ever. Like, I don't really do the things to get a huge online following. I have a very specific online following. It's like, it's just a few thousand people, but they're all kind of in the niche that it's quality over quantity, but I don't really worry about that. And it's a part of what I do. It's a part of my business. But I can look at other chiropractors and be like, man, they have 20,000 or they have 80,000 or they have 100,000. And it's like, I just don't get too hung up on that. And I would encourage any chiropractors, like, don't really look around at what everybody else is doing and beat yourself up over that. It's just because, how's your practice doing? Are you paying your bills? Are you growing? Are you doing better this month than you did last month? Like, those are all things that matter more than the number that you have of followers, because some people pay for followers and they're just
Yep.
bots, and
Yep.
that looks impressive, but I've seen people that have 30, 40,000 likes on an Instagram post and it's all bots. It's like, that's not impressive at all. That's stupid.
Right. Yeah, and you'll ratio yourself because you have to watch out for that. So if you are considering, if you're someone who's caught up in like being proud of the following, and you're considering buying followers or buying likes or whatever, you have to be very careful because what will happen is the more followers you have, the more engagement you should have on your page, and Instagram knows that.
Yep.
And so if you have a very high following and very low engagement, you'll start to get ratioed and they'll stop showing you content because they can tell that you've purchased your followers. Or not even that you purchased them, they think your page is less valuable because although you have a lot of people following you, no one is engaging with your content, and therefore your content must not be valuable.
Yes. Because low engagement tells Instagram, Facebook, or whoever that no one gives a crap. And if
Right.
no one gives a crap who's following you, why would the people who are not following you give a crap? And therefore your stuff gets bumped.
Yeah. And that'll throttle it. So you just should be very careful to do that. And to be honest, as my following has increased to where it is now, it has not really done much net positive for my business besides removing the amount of conversations I'm having in the DM.
Yeah.
But it has done a lot of like net negative. Like I have to spend a lot of time moderating my comment section to remove like sexual or just like totally gross comments.
Yep.
I have to spend it's much more difficult for me to keep track of people who are DMing me for real reasons because they want to be a patient or they have a question
Yeah.
versus I get a lot of spam stuff. People just send me like random videos.
Yeah, I get
So
that too.
I spend so much time just like moderating and dealing with the downsides of having a
Yeah.
big following that I almost wish it wasn't as big because then I could just continue to do what I was doing in the beginning and just focus on attracting new patients and making
Yeah.
it very business oriented.
Yeah, that was actually something I was going to ask you, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there's always a price to pay with everything. It's like with every positive. We were talking about the ring dinger, before we started recording. It's like it's like there's so many like positives with his success online and whatever, but you can't have that positive without the negative coming along with the equal and opposite reaction, and it's the same way with you. It's the same way with me. It's like with all of these things, there's positives, but there's also negatives, and you just have to be willing to deal with that.
Yeah. It's a double-edged sword. You'll get like I'll get offers for me to go out and like do like teeth whitening or stuff like that for free or different influencer programs because they want to get a shout out. And I've
Yeah.
done a few things like that, get some like services in exchange for free. But then you just get tons and tons of emails all the time, or you get tons of spam, or you get people, just that are comments, like you get crazy people that comment on everything that you've ever posted and you have to like block people and moderate their comments. And it's just like it a lot of times can feel not worth it. And I don't know if
Yeah.
I would say that it's made my life better on the whole.
I'll tell you, I had the weirdest thing I ever had was there was this lady that was I'm assuming she found me because she looked me up because we were actually going to the same church, and she was crazy as a $3 bill. And she'd come up to me and have these weird conversations. and she was like following me online. She was signed up for my newsletter. Like she's commenting on all my, she's not a chiropractor. She's just a crazy person that lived in my town. And and, and she would stop me and talk to me. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like this is like, and I'm assuming it's just because she could watch my stuff and, she felt like she knew me, you know what I mean? Like there's a certain level of that with putting yourself out there. And,
Yeah.
but that was the weirdest one.
Yeah. There's what I think Dr. Bo Hightower talks about it. Like he had like this whole incident where this guy was like stalking him, thought that Bo was communicating to him in code in his
Yeah.
videos. And like then he like called the FBI, not Dr. Hightower, this
Yeah.
stalker called the FBI and is then making allegations against Dr. Hightower to the FBI. The FBI had to come and like there's this whole big thing that went down. And I can't remember the specifics of the story, but it's just like, yeah, you get to experience significantly more crazy the bigger your following gets and the more people that you interact with. So just be careful what you wish for if you really want to blow up.
This lady accused me of something that I'm not going to say on the podcast. I will tell you after we get done recording, but
Okay.
that it was, she was legit crazy, and it was uncomfortable. It was not, I mean, it was terrible. And I get a little bit of that. You get people that comment on stuff. I've had not that I attract a bunch of women or whatever, but I've had women over the years that have like messaged me and they're trying to talk to me and stuff. And I always tell them, I have a general response now. It's like, Jerry does not have friends that are girls. Like, it's like I have a wife. I love her very much. I don't have friends that are girls. All my friends are dudes. So it's like, I'm not going to make friends with some new person chit-chatting me online. Like, I'm not meeting up with people. I'm not doing any of that stuff. I don't have friends that are girls. So
Yeah.
but some of that stuff kind of comes with it.
The internet is just such a weird place. It's so surreal sometimes to just be so involved in it because this is how I attract patients to my practice. This is how I run my businesses. And so I am
Yeah.
just enveloped in the internet every day. But it is just a bizarre place to be at.
Have you, last thing I'll kind of bug you about, and then we'll just wrap this up. Have you had issues? I mean, you had kind of mentioned having issues with poor quality patients, like when you were doing the lead gen stuff. Um, my assumption would be if you're actually interacting with people or trying to interact, and then you build up this level of authority that you have less of that you're dealing with now, you're getting maybe better people from the internet. But what is your experience with quality patients? Because I know I have a lot of chiropractors that'll complain about online marketing, especially when they're paying someone to do lead gen stuff for them, or they're just like, oh, these are just the worst patients ever. Like, what is your experience with what you're doing and like the quality of person that's coming in?
Yeah. I For the most part, it's been pretty standard general population type quality. I mean, I'm not getting a ton of like really awful like junky patients or people who can't afford care. I'm also not getting a ton of just like patients who walk in, they're like, I want to buy a 30 visit plan right now, like, sign me up. You get a lot of people in the middle. You get a lot of people who they just want your help. They want to know what you can do for them. And
Yeah.
the thing I always say, because people talk about, well, when I talk about how many new patients I get and that they're all from social, the first thing that comes out of every chiropractor is, well, how's your retention?
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Like, well, your retention is going to be as good as your retention strategies are. So
Yeah.
if you're good at following up with people, if you're good at explaining care, if you're good at helping people commit to a plan that they can afford and is going to work for them schedule wise, then you're going to have good retention.
Yeah.
Now I do get, and this is where you will run into it. I do get out of that 50, plus new patients every month. I probably 10 of them are people who are what I call chiropractic curious, right? They've seen the
The
videos, they've
tire
always
kickers.
wanted
Yeah.
to get adjusted,
Yeah.
they just want to come in, try it out, get adjusted for the first time, and then they disappear. I don't mind that because my whole process for the first exam plus treatment and everything all happens on that first visit.
Yeah.
30 minutes. I don't mind trading 30 minutes of my time to let someone experience chiropractic, especially if they're going to video it. But even if we're not going to video it, because if we video it, then I have content from it anyways. But I don't mind trading 30 minutes of my time because I've had many of those kind of tire kicker patients who are come in, try it out once, who they never become a consistent patient, but then their brother-in-law or their
Yeah.
boss or someone gets injured and they know me, they're the only chiropractor that they have any experience with, and then they refer that person to me. So
Yeah.
I've gotten high quality patients as referrals from these low quality internet patients that a lot of docs don't want to waste their time with. But if you have an efficient exam, if you can do your job quickly and thoroughly, like I don't mind trading 30 minutes of my time just for the chance that someone might refer me in the future, even if they don't come back.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that that's been your experience because one of the pieces of advice that I've told people without this is one of those times where I'm giving advice without any actual real life experience in that category is when people ask me about like those high volume, like if they're getting a lot of patients from lead gen or they're getting a lot of patients from the internet or whatever, and they're kind of like, what do I do about that? I always tell them that efficiency on your new patient efficiency process is really important because it's like if the person's not going to stick around for more than one or two visits, it can be okay as long as you're not wasting massive amounts of time and energy and resources on the front end of it, thinking they're going to be around for 20 visits and they're not. Like that.
Yes.
That first visit or that first visit or two needs to be worth it for you. You don't need to be way behind on that, thinking you're going to make it up for that demographic
Yeah.
of people.
And I mean, I could see if you're having them come in, you're doing full spine x-rays, you're doing a functional movement analysis,
Yeah.
then you're taking them through the history and exam, you're doing a second day report of findings, and
Yeah.
then you're treating them like you're letting that person eat up so much time. I mean, in my office, you only get x-rays if you've had like a traumatic injury or I think that there's
Yeah.
something really wrong, right? So I don't do x-rays in office. I treat on the same day as the exam because for me, like chiropractors, we mostly treat like the same five things, right? It's like sprains, strains, mild radiculopathies, headaches, right? Aches and
Yeah.
pains. So, it's a lot of what we're doing is not incredibly complex. I don't need to sit there and spend hours thinking about how a patient's going to respond. I know I've
Yeah.
seen this before. I know generally how you're going to respond. I know generally how many visits you need, how frequently, right? So I don't have to sit there and stroke my beard all evening, thinking about what I'm going to do with your treatment plan. I just
Yeah.
get straight to it and we start
Yeah.
fixing you up. But because of that, that allows me to do that. And I'm getting paid for the first visit too. So it's not like I'm doing this visit for free.
Yeah.
So everything about that, the value is there. So where even if they don't ever come back again, I feel like I made enough money to cover my 30 minutes. I'm not
Yeah.
spending an inordinate amount of time. And it's on to the next patient. I just don't worry about it.
Yeah. And I think that's the mistake that chiropractors make is that they will they count on someone. Like if they're used to people being around for a long period of time, they'll probably be behind on that first visit or two from a time money standpoint. It's like they haven't been paid appropriately for the amount of time and effort they put in initially, but they know that person's going to come in for 15 visits or 20 visits or whatever. You can't do that if
No.
if you have people coming in that are curious about it or like a high volume of people coming in and they may not be sticking around for very long. You have to tighten up that first day.
Yeah. You've got to make every minute that you're spending with a patient work on the dollar sign numbers, right? Like it has to work. So you can't be doing like a 3 hour, first visit
Yeah.
that's then priced at like 50 or $60.
Yeah.
You're gonna burn everything up. So make sure that you're getting adequately compensated for that first visit, whatever that has to be for what you're doing. And maybe if you have patients that are coming from a source and you're noticing that they're taking up a lot of time, maybe consider reworking some of your new patient processes. Maybe
Yeah.
treat on the first day. Don't do a second day report of findings. Maybe you don't take x-rays if you really don't think that you need them, right? Now granted, if you're like a Gonstead person, whatever, those got to get taken, right? But you know, it's worth considering ways that you can make that less of a strain on your business to have these patients.
It's sort of back to what we were talking about in terms of the business model in general is not sticking yourself into it where you're like, this is the only way I know how to do it. This is the only way my chiropractor did it. This is the only way I was taught how to do it. Therefore, this is the only way it can be done. I think that not only from an overall business standpoint, but also just from a day-to-day new patient marketing, all of that stuff, you could probably take that same concept and say, just because this is the only way you know how it's done, doesn't mean you have to lock yourself into the prison of doing it that way forever. Like you might be able to come up with a better way that works better for your area, for your practice, for your style, for your life, whatever.
Yeah, and you've got to figure it out. I mean, I spent the first 6 months of my practice. I mean, my exams were an hour long. My documentation was very inefficient. My treatments were 30 minutes
Yeah.
long. When I first opened, I was doing a lot of rehab as well with it, and I realized I was like, I just don't even like. I value rehab, but I don't like being the one administering it. So
Yeah.
now I refer to a physical therapist.
Yeah.
So if you look at my practice the first 6 months to my practice the second 6 months, they look like almost two completely different practices.
Yeah.
As I got more efficient, I learned more about what I enjoyed doing, how I like the practice to run, and got things dialed in. And now it runs like a well-oiled machine, right? We're just rocking and rolling.
Yeah.
But it takes time to get there. And you have to be willing to look at what you're doing and ask, is this the best way that I could be doing this? Is there a way that I could do this more efficient? Or is there a way I could have more satisfaction and enjoyment that I could run my practice differently?
Yeah.
And you have to just constantly refine that.
So let's do this. Can you just talk about your stuff? I know you have the Instagram stuff that you're teaching people. You have some adjustment stuff that you're doing to kind of help people become better adjusters. Just kind of let people know where they can follow you, find you, and then if they want to learn more from the stuff that you're offering, kind of what they can do. Kind of plug yourself here before we get off.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So on Instagram, it's at Strat Poulson, Strat Poulson, Poulson. That's where I'm most active. That's where I interact with people the most. So if you have questions or you want to DM me, I spend a lot of time talking to people in DMs. I've got no problem answering questions and chatting with you. Instagram is probably the best way to get a hold of me. Follow me there. You'll also see there where I post my videos of me treating patients. I have online courses on adjusting. So we cover full spine. There's multiple different modules, extremities. There's some soft tissue online courses there. So if you want to improve your skills, or if you see the way that I adjust and you think that you'd like to do some of the adjustments the same way that I do, or learn to refine that, you can take my online courses. I also have an online course for social media marketing. So if you want to learn how to create video content, how to do what I did to launch my practice and put those videos out as ads and start getting new patients from social media, you can take that as well. So all those are from my link tree, which is in my bio on Instagram. So if you follow me or you go to my bio, you can click on the link, click online seminars, and all my courses are in there. If you have any questions about anything, I'm more than happy to talk with you about that in the DMs. And you can kind of check out all the things that I got going on.
All right, man. Is there anything else that you wanted to say before we get off of here? I've had fun. I think this has been great, but if you have anything you want to say before we finish up, now's the time. Now or never.
No, no. This has been great. Thank you for having me on it. I'm a longtime listener to the Rocket Chiro podcast. I think that what you do is great. And I think that you provide a lot of value for the students. And you definitely provided a lot of value for me when I came out and thinking about different things and different aspects of practice. So I'm just glad that I was here, and hopefully our listeners will find this valuable and have some good take homes, and look forward to maybe doing something like this again in a year or two.
Awesome, man. Hey, thanks for being on the podcast. I appreciate it. And we'll talk later. Okay.